All right, before we go on today's show, some, you call it disappointing news if you want. Kaneal Sweetwyne of Skyridge High School has reneged on his commitment to the BYU football program. He was a member of the 2026 recruiting cycle, a high-level 3-star, borderline 4-star talent at quarterback that BYU was excited to have in the fold. But I think as things continue to progress here, you bring in a guy like Bear Bachmeier via the transfer portal, you get a commitment from 5-star prospect Ryder Lyons. I don't think it's all that surprising that Kaneal Sweetwyne is backed off this commitment for the BYU football program. Does that mean that he can't recommit at some point down the line for BYU? No, that doesn't mean that, but more often than not, when guys renege on a long-term commitment, because this young man, speaking of Kaneal, committed to BYU all the way back in February. He kind of surprised folks by committing so early on to the Cougars, but latched on with them, and it was expected to be the quarterback BYU took in the 2026 cycle. I know that Ryder Lyons is also a member of the 2026 class, but as many of you know, he plans on going on a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and he actually will be enrolling in 2027. So it left kind of a gap where Kaneal Sweetwyne factored in as BYU's 2026 QB, and Aaron Roderick has been very blunt that he will take a quarterback every single recruiting cycle, and he's not going to back off that because, just simply put, transfer portal and this new era of college football, you got to keep that room as well stocked as you possibly can. Now, you also factor in guys like an Enoch Watson coming home off of a mission this coming offseason. Yeah, the quarterback room is going to be a little bit bloated and a little bit just in terms of the overall bodies. It's going to have a lot of guys in there. I think Kaneal Sweetwyne looked at it and said, you know what? I need to examine my options a little more fully. And I wish him nothing but the best. I can tell you this much. When he committed to BYU, I had a person in the recruiting sphere say that they thought Kaneal Sweetwyne was going to emerge this coming prep season, which kicks off a week from this Friday. They thought he was going to become the best quarterback in the state. They legitimately thought he had that type of talent in him. So we'll see if he can ultimately realize that. And if he does realize that, guess what? He is going to have no shortage of suitors for his services if he has that type of a big season for Skyridge High School. He's got a big arm. He's got great athleticism. He's listed at 6'3" or 6'4", depending on where you look, 190-ish pounds, and can really run. I've called some of his high school football games. I've been very impressed with his overall dual threat capability, but I think the biggest thing is he needed to hone is his arm and make it more of an accurate weapon. And I think so long as that proves to be the case this upcoming season, he's going to have options in the recruiting sphere. BYU, I'm sure, will continue to stay in touch with him. I know he's very close to the Gennaro Guilford family because Gennaro Guilford Jr., who is Gennaro Guilford, the BYU cornerbacks coach's son, also plays at Skyridge, and I know those two families are very close to one another. So, like I said, I'm not going to count out BYU potentially getting another commitment from Kaneal Sweetwyne down the line, but I also understand why Kaneal is looking at his options here because I think he looks at the way BYU's been recruiting this position. They've got a 4-star in Bear Bachmeier, who's technically a part of the 2025 cycle, who's already here on campus. You look at McKay Hillstead, Trayson Bourget, who have extra years of eligibility. I mentioned Enoch Watson, who's a high-level 3-star talent in his own right out of Arizona, coming home off of his mission. And then, obviously, the impending arrival down the line of Ryder Lyons. Yeah, you're going to have to fight for playing time, and it's going to be a really interesting battle to see who emerges at the top of some of these QB battles in days to come for the BYU football program. But I also going to understand that Kaneal Sweetwyne, I'm not saying he's not a competitor. I think he's just looking out for his best interest and saying, hey, I need to see what my other options are. I respect it. I understand it. And it now leaves BYU having to go out there and finds a quarterback in the 2026 cycle. The good news is it's still early enough in the recruiting cycle period for Aaron Roderick to go back to the drawing board, look at what other quarterbacks are on their list. Obviously, the transfer portal could come into effect as well once the season gets going because you start to see guys enter the transfer portal. And we all know that quarterbacks, they're very quick to jump when they don't feel like they're getting the playing time or the opportunity that they feel like they need to be afforded at various programs. So I'm not concerned that BYU can't backfill that spot in that recruiting class, in the 2026 class, whether it's a high school talent or whether it's a transfer portal guy or even a junior college transfer, should they find somebody that they think fits what they're looking for. The biggest thing here to understand is that the quarterback position for BYU looks like it's in pretty good hands for years to come, so long as the guys that they have recruited pan out. If Bear Bachmeier works out, that's great. He could be a multi-year starter. By the time Ryder Lyons returns home from a mission, maybe he redshirts for a year, Bear Bachmeier then exits stage right, and it's the Ryder Lyons show going forward beyond that. It's tough to obviously understand the unique dynamics across all this. Simply put, Kaneal Sweetwyne could have decided that BYU wasn't for him anymore. But I think that Aaron Roderick, he's done a very, very fine job lately, in particular, at bringing in top shelf talent for that quarterback position. And I think he's quieted some of the doubters about his ability to recruit that position at a high level, because if you look at who he's recruited, I think he's answered all the questions about if he can bring in top shelf talent. You don't bring in a top 10 consensus quarterback like Ryder Lyons, or in the case of a guy like Bear Bachmeier. That kid went to Stanford, but could have gone anywhere in this country, and BYU wanted him badly. And he hits the portal after everything that went down at Stanford, and Stanford's loss was a major, major gain for the BYU football program. And hey, Bear Bachmeier's in the mix to be BYU starting quarterback as an 18-year-old true freshman. Shows you some pretty impressive talent from that young man, because a lot of people thought that I'll include myself in this. You look at the McKay Hillsteads and the Trayson Bourguets, where they had extra time in the system at BYU. They've gone through practices. They went through a spring ball and were battling for that backup position behind Jake Retzloff at the time. You would have thought that their experience alone would have given them a leg up over Bear Bachmeier. And all he did once he enrolled in May at BYU was pick up the playbook as fast as anybody, because according to Aaron Roderick, he knows everything there is to know about the playbook. And really the only thing that's holding him back is getting time on the field with his teammates and making sure that he has the timing down, kind of the machinations of how BYU operates their offense. That shows that kid's got some talent. I can understand why Kaneal Sweetwyne may have been looking at that saying, you know what? It may be in my best interest to see if I can find a better position for myself. And heck, maybe he comes back around at some point and says, you know what, BYU, you were the best option. I'm going to stick with y'all. And it would once again be welcome, because I think Kaneal has got a lot of talent and it would add to that quarterback room. But those QB battles in years to come for BYU, they are going to be ones for the ages, because the talent alone indicates there's a lot of really, really good players that BYU is going to have competing for playing time. And it's not going to be an easy climb to the top if you want to be BYU starting quarterback, at least it looks like in the near-term future. Obviously, things can change. We all know that in this day and age with NIL, transfer portal, and the like. But right now, on paper, BYU looks pretty well stocked for years to come. And I understand that the 2026 cycle might be without a QB for the time being. But have faith that Matt Mitchell is the assistant quarterbacks coach and Aaron Roderick obviously is the QB's coach, and more importantly, the offensive coordinator. They will now go back to the drawing board and make sure that they cross their I's, dot their T's, and make sure that they have at least a guy or two in mind that they can recruit over the coming months, if not in the transfer portal cycle to come, to backfill that spot if Kaneal Sweetwyne does indeed decide to go elsewhere with his recruitment. All right, that's going to do it for today's edition of the show. As always, you guys are the absolute best. Cannot thank you guys enough for your continued support of the show. Please continue to subscribe, rate, and review it. If you want those insider notes on BYU basketball, football practice, if I can get the two sports right today, nonetheless, as always, make sure you check out the Locked On Cougars Insider Group and become a member today to get that inside intel that you will not find anywhere else. But once again, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And as always, thank you for being an everydayer right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.